Welcome back. It's Business 101, and my name is Blyden Ukem. Today in Business 101, we'll be looking at electricity sector, the power sector in Nigeria. We're looking at 2025. We're approaching the first quarter of 2025 and what the possibilities could be in the sector. Also, casting our minds back to 2024. Meanwhile, my guests are standing by, ready for the conversation. Engineer Dennis Ebenezer, a project manager with Haven Hill Synergy Limited, joining the conversation today. Engineer Ebenezer, so good to have you on the show. While anticipating to hear from Engineer Ebenezer, Engineer Obong Akpabio with the Bom Power Plant also being part of the mix, ready for the conversation this evening. Engineer Obong Akpabio, good evening. Welcome to Business 101.
Good evening. It's so good to be here.
All right. Well, we're trying to do a catch-up with Engineer Ebenezer there. Engineer Ebenezer, if you can hear me, probably let me know. Well, quickly, let's get to the thick of the conversation quickly. Engineer Obong, in recent times, last year we spoke about the Nigerian power sector, and we look at certain indices, the problems in that direction, and we're talking about electrification programs in rural areas. I remember the conversation very well. But today we'll be looking at 2024, after all the policies from the government, after the privatization of the sector had gotten to 10 years, we're looking at the new outlook, and behold, a new outlook is here. Part of the conversation from last year from my end would be we saw multiple grid collapse, but put that side by side to this year, it's been exciting news, especially the early part of this year, when the power minister came out and said, look, we've been able to generate 6,003 megawatts of power. And now I put it to you. Give me your thoughts regarding the power sector last year and the possibilities for this year.
Looking at the grid instability, comparing 2024 with 2025, we have seen a massive improvement in that sector. One of the improvements has been the deployment of the SCADA network in order to monitor the grid imbalance. SCADA is just a control and data acquisition that helps to monitor the load in order to monitor the grid. Now, the grid frequency in Nigeria is 50 Hz, and the load is what determines the frequency per time. So it's the job of the National Control Center in order to control the grid frequency. So far so good. They have been doing a fantastic job, and we've even had the NEC, going from power plants to power plants, you understand, to find out what is their need specific problems in order to address them, so that the grid system can be more stable. So we've seen NEC put in the work, we've seen TCN put in the work, we've seen NCC put in the work, and comparing this year to last year, the grid has been more stable.
Okay, so possibilities for this year has been the fact that there have been lots of renovation work or maintenance work for the national grid, and it's been most stable. Let's also talk about revenue in the power sector, because in recent times we've seen an increase in revenue. Just as we're talking about improvement in terms of power generation, there have been increase in revenue, and we hear the sector revenue grew by 70% to 1.7 trillion naira in 2024. And part of all of these, many are accusing the TCN, and not just the TCN, the DISCOs and the entire regulatory body for the tariff. Recently we heard, we've seen, not just hearing, because beginning from January was a plan to increase tariff by about 60%. We've seen the implementation of that, and it's been quite high. But 2024, one of the things to really mark was increase in revenue. And many are saying it was just all about the tariffs.
All right, so we've seen increase in revenue because there have been increase in power supply. Like comparing to the place I stay in Akwa Ibom State, we have up to like 20 hours light a day. So that shows an increase in revenue. Now, but there is a problem then. The DISCO also have a problem because, there can be increased supply to the consumers, but the consumers are not willing to pay for the power they are receiving. Now, there could also be a situation in which the discos now get money, but the process of remitting the money to the federal government. Now, understand that for us, the GENCOs, we receive our revenues from the federal government, not directly from the consumer. So even if there is increased revenue, the federal government are still the ones that pay us. So I could receive a whole lot, but still decides to pay you a percentage of what you're supposed to receive. So that's why the GENCOs are crying out that even when there have increased tariffs for different bands, we have not seen the commensurate reflection in the amount of money that MBED gives to the GENCO companies.
Okay.
I don't even, you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I'm trying to also, because I think many Nigerians are looking at it. In other words, there's massive revenue, but the generation companies are not having that amount of money. It's not reflecting for the generation companies. But the discos, somehow, they're also complaining despite all of this. And put this side by side to the explanation you're about to give. Because the discos are saying that the federal government and most of the governmental parastatals departments, recently, just today, we talked about the military also being involved in vandalism, not just the Air Force being involved in vandalism in Ikeja, Lagos. And they're saying most of these departments, governmental departments and parastatals have not been paying the cost of electricity. They've not been paying. And so at the end of it, there's increase in revenue, but much could be done.
Yes, that's why I started by saying that the disco also have a challenge. Now, but to me, the solution to that challenge would be prepaid metering, because one of the problems in situations like that is that it's estimated billing, so that a consumer collects power and after that it doesn't pay. But if we're looking at the estimated billing, in which you have to pay for the load, the power you need to consume, you now know it's just like your GSM. You now know that if you don't pay for it, you won't have the light. So NEC has established or has moved a motion for the compulsory metering of the standard transfer specification meters. So if those metering is being enforced, that would go a long way to solve the problem in which the discos are encountering. Because as long as estimated billing is still what is in vogue, the discos will have a difficult time recouping their revenue.
Okay, let's talk about the GENCOs now. What the limitations have been for the generating companies in order to make that money. You earlier talked about it and said, while there's increase in revenue, it's not reflecting for the GENCOs. What has been the limitation for the GENCOs?
All right, for the GENCOs, the body responsible for paying GENCOs is called NBET, Nigerian Bulk Electricity Company. So it's just like dealing with the federal government. Like up till date, the NBET still pays the GENCO a percentage of what their total energy generated is due. So take, for instance, we generate, like, let's say, 42,000 megawatt hour of electricity for a month, let's say January. NBET says, oh, I can only pay you 30% of what you invoiced for. You can't force the federal government. So it's just an appeal to the federal government that for us, the GENCOs, to be in business, to be able to pay the gas supplier, take care of the running cost of generating electricity, the federal government should at least try to pay us up to 70 to 80% of the money we generate. The debt profile in the generation company is huge. Everybody is complaining, oh, the federal government, they are not paying. Because, oh, there is no money. After a while, they'll pay you, let's say, 20% of it. After a while, they'll pay you 30% of it. With those trickling funds, revenue coming in, it poses a problem for the generation companies to still stay afloat. That's why, on the other hand, you hear the gas suppliers saying that, oh, generation companies are owing them cost of gas because gas is expensive. So it's an appeal to the federal government to fund the GENCOs so that the GENCOs can take off the gas suppliers and also the running cost of generating electricity. That's why again I would say the sector, the generation sector is not lucrative. You see a whole lot of people not wanting to go into the sector because of, number one, the huge amount of money it takes to start up the sector, and even after investing so much, you're not still getting the value for the money you've invested.
All right, many concerns, especially for the Gencos moving forward and trying to get the value for the money they've invested. Well, if we have to look at some of these conversations around this, we heard that NEC, the Electricity Regulation Commission, the body regulating electricity in Nigeria, has directed DISCOs to publish refunds made on meters purchased. And while it's been an unfolding conversation, just as we also hear that the date owed Gencos now, it's a 4 trillion naira about then, or even increasing more than that, and $2 billion investment recorded last year. Well, Engineer Obong Okpabio, let's look at it from this angle. Because one thing is, when you look at governmental policies and the direction it's going, what do you make of 2025? And now we've seen increase in tariff, and now we've seen, you earlier talked about improvement in terms of maintenance of some of the facilities. Many would also look at a case of insecurity amid multiple grid collapse last year and how this is working. Take us through how the government is handling all of this to make sure, now that we having certain areas that are having more power, about 20 hours, and they're calling them Band A, and how the government is going to continue to sustain this, and we do not have multiple grid collapse as we had in 2024.
All right. So for the issue of the grid collapse, I actually said that the NCC has deployed a SCADA system.
Okay.
A remote monitoring system that monitors the grid. So that SCADA system is one means of helping us to have a stable grid. Another thing they are deploying is what we call governor control, in which the load in each generating station responds to the frequency per time, because it's just a balance between load and frequency. So once we take a whole lot of load, you understand, the frequency drops. Once the load reduces, the frequency goes up. So it's just about the load frequency balance. And NCC, they are on top of the game, to actually minimize this imbalance. Now, when we look at the NEC, just recently the NEC gave legal to some states to manage their regulatory body, like the Niger State, Ogun State, and Lagos State. So when you break up something bulk into tiny pieces, you can be able to exercise more control. Because to me, the bulk of the work was on NEC. But with each state now having their regulatory commission, they'll be able to manage the state-specific needs as regards to power. So if you ask me, I would say that NEC is doing a good job in order to solve the problem of grid instability. Now, when you talk about vandalism, you can't totally eradicate that from the system. So what I would say is, from each state, they should put more strict measures against people who are found wanting in areas like that. Because once the fines are increased, it will deter people from engaging in such activities. That will go a long way to try to curb the issue of vandalism in the power sector.
Okay, one aspect of the conversation you've mentioned is states becoming independent in terms of handling. Knowing the situations and the problem peculiar to that particular zone. So now let's look at Akwa Ibom states, for example, because I listened to the names of the states you mentioned. You talked about Lagos, Niger State, and others, and you did not mention Akwa Ibom State. So how long is it going to take the federal government? You said this is the way forward. Or NEC, how long is it supposed to take NEC to give these independent states the authorization to handle that interface in terms of the power sector? And put that side by side with the peculiarity of Akwa Ibom State. What are the issues in Akwa Ibom, in the power sector in Akwa Ibom, and how can it be handled and improved even further?
All right, so comparing Akwa Ibom State side by side with other states, I would say Akwa Ibom State is the most blessed state as regards to power. Why am I saying so? Because number one, Akwa Ibom State has an independent power generation company called Ibom Power. Akwa Ibom State also has availability of gas from a company called Akugas.
So with gas availability and a generation company, Akwa Ibom State should not have an issue once it comes to power generation. Now, considering transfer of legislative authorities to Akwa Ibom State, the issue has passed the first reading in the House of Assembly. So we are waiting for the second reading in which there'll be amendments on the bill already proposed. I have been opportune to see the bill proposed, and I've also given in my own contribution to the bill proposed. And I believe that if Akwa Ibom State government followed through that, Akwa Ibom State would, the issue of power collapse or power insufficiency will be a thing of the past in Akwa Ibom State. The governor is doing a whole lot, like even in March, I think March, yes, they're supposed to be an energy summit in which all stakeholders in Akwa Ibom State will come together and discuss the way forward. So if you ask me, the state is taking pragmatic measures to ensure that the power issues in Akwa Ibom State are being addressed properly.
As fast as possible, as you're talking about March, it gets to happen. But one other way to look at would be the distribution companies. And I remember some time ago we had this discussion, and you talked about it, that the GenCos are generating distribution companies and the lines in that direction. But before we get to talk about distribution companies and also go back to talk about tariffs and the way forward, we'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, it will be a conversation on Business 101, still looking at Nigeria's power sector and the growth in it in 2025. Don't go anywhere.
The hustle is real, but with hard work, you can become successful. And be your own king. Your wins are worth celebrating with Chelsea London Dry Gin. Chelsea London Dry Gin now comes in a non-refillable bottle with guala cap. Chelsea London Dry Gin. Right spirit, right feeling.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
We have joining us from the United States, Niles Pelshak, a cybersecurity expert with Cisco. Of course, we're looking at certain cybercrime activities on the continent and its impact on our world. So we're looking to look at the impact of cybercrime in African countries amid underprotected infrastructures. What's the current statistics where cybercrime is concerned, as we've continued to see, emerging laws to safeguard that territory?
Oh, there are several cybercrime that are actually going on right now, ranging from phishing attacks to ransomware, malware. There's a lot of them. In fact, organizations, this second quarter of this fiscal year, there's been about each organization goes through about 3,000 cyber attacks per week. That's a 37% increase. Okay, so there are a lot of cyber attacks going on, and we all need to be concerned about it.
What are some of the causative factors for these cyber attacks going on? Especially we see government agencies come under attack, financial institutions. What would you say is the causative factor to the rise in these attacks?
I think for Africa, one of the biggest things is that Africa is coming online, okay? So if you think of other first world countries, they are already digitized. Today, Africa is becoming more and more digitized, which means that There are several companies, healthcare infrastructures, there are a lot of businesses, banking organizations that are coming online. And so as they're coming online, that's a playground for attackers. And so the more and more people are using the internet, as you know, more and more of us are relying on our mobile device to use internet. That's an opportunity for attackers to say, oh, where can I infiltrate?
Just on the heel of what you're saying, we're seeing that cybercrime is projected to grow by about 15% per year globally, which was, when we come to numeric trend, is standing at about $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. Would you say that also with regards to this, we've seen Africa increase numerically to about $3 trillion since 2015. Would you say that this is part of what is exposing Africa to these attacks? And these attacks, are they African originated, or we are having the West and the East, as it were, infiltrate into the cyberspace of the African continent?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So thank you for asking that. So yes, Africa is very vulnerable to cyber attacks, and those threats are increasing day by day. One of the reasons, like I mentioned, is because of the fact that we are becoming more consumers of the internet. There are other reasons that is driving this. We have, I'm sure you've heard of 419. There's actually a name of a fraud called a Nigerian fraud, okay? These are happening worldwide, but the problem is that those frauds don't always originate from Nigeria. Okay, so if I am able to steal data from the users in Nigeria, if I'm able to get your BVN, if I'm able to attain your NIN ID, where you're from, your card, I am able to go ahead and perform an attack from anywhere in the world. But the problem with that is that if we have to prove where the problem comes from, we will have to go back to the originator. Where is the source of the attack? And obviously, that's going to be like, well, the name is a Nigerian name. It's a NIN from Nigeria. It's also BVN from Nigeria, etc. So no, not all frauds come from Nigeria, quite all right. But some of them does come from Nigeria, absolutely.
So what are the challenges in Africans being able to prevent cyber crimes as we've continued to see the consequences on the continent, as it were? What can we do differently? We are still emerging on this space. So what can we do to protect ourselves?
You are so right. Africa, we do face several challenges in being able to prevent. And prevention is not enough anymore. So we have to prevent, we have to defend, and we have to respond to cyber attacks, okay? Now, there are three things that I want to mention that are key to what is happening in the in cybercrime today. Number one, I would say that internet users are growing, okay? More and more of us are consuming internet, and more of us are going on social media. We're using it to do work. So definitely that is one challenge. We need to figure out, how does that individual learn to maintain a proper cyber hygiene? How do you make sure that your data is safe? How do you make sure that you're not just signing away your data to social media as much as possible? How do you make sure that you're not exposing your company's computer or data or your consumers' data? That's one thing. The other thing that I would like to bring up, it's that we have a very narrow number of cybersecurity experts, okay? So because of the growing nature of cyber attacks, right, we need more and more cybersecurity professionals to be able to not only provide cybersecurity awareness, but also to provide, be able to set up security in organizations, and to be able to prevent, to detect, and to respond. So we have internet users that need to provide their own personal cyber hygiene. We have cybersecurity experts that are in need. And the last thing I want to bring up is the legislative regulations. Okay, so not only are individuals and companies are required to enforce security in the environment, there are things that the government agencies could also do. Like, I met a young lady the other day And the young lady said, "Oh, I'm a lawyer. I'm a barrister, and there's nothing I can really do in tech." And I was like, "Wait a minute. As a lawyer, if you're interested in cybersecurity, we need governance. We need to create compliances and regulations that could be enforced to ensure that organizations are putting mechanisms in place to protect their consumers." So those are the three main things I would say we could do to prevent cybercrimes in right now in our space.
Okay, so the other question will be in going to have more cybersecurity experts on the continent, would you say that the cybersecurity space is very complex? Because sometimes, just like in the example of the lawyer that you've given, a lot of people just think it's not something that my brain, can crack open. So would you say that cybersecurity is really a complex deal for people?
So, that's an interesting question. Yeah, cybersecurity requires a lot of experience, but those experience can be learned. There are a vast amount of opportunities in cybersecurity, and you don't have to become the expert starting out. There are different levels to different roles and responsibilities that you can choose to participate. There are entry-level certifications that you can actually get to prepare you to work in organizations to be able to defend, to protect, and to be able to respond to cyber attacks. Right? Okay. Those things are in place. There are vast amount of opportunities worldwide. This is one of the growing opportunity where you will always have a job if you are able to pick up a cybersecurity skill set and be able to provide that as a service in an organization. Okay. So when you're thinking about a career, you need to be thinking about longevity. Well, how long can you be working in this space? And cybersecurity, as far as internet is concerned, that's not going anywhere. And so therefore, cybersecurity skills will always be needed.
Okay. So just to wrap this up, you were talking about, cyber hygiene, and a lot of people do not even know what that's about. Do you also think that, social media and instant messaging apps are very susceptible to cybercrime? And what is the place of artificial intelligence? Why, just wrap that around how we can stay hygienious where cybercrime is concerned.
Yes. So personal hygiene is very, very important. Once you begin to care about your own personal data, then, when you're working in a company, you'll begin to also care about your consumers or your customers' data. When we talk about personal hygiene, we talk about how much do you put online. We have social medias like Snapchat. We have users that are saying, "Oh, I can put my data on Snapchat and it disappears." No, sir, it does not disappear. Anything you put on the internet will remain on the internet. You may not see it, but tomorrow, someone like myself can pull up as evidence. Okay, so that's number one. And then you brought up AI, artificial intelligence. That is huge. AI technologies does pose real and potential threat to many companies, right? And many companies are beginning to use artificial intelligence to solve problems, to create business processes, etc. And so you know what? Well, if companies are using AI to prevent, to defend, to respond, well, guess what? Attackers are also doing the same thing. They're learning these tools, they're learning the languages, and the threat actors are also using it to provide more sophisticated phishing emails that looks more real for people to bait. They're creating more and better social engineering attacks. So, all around, it's important for all of us to care about cybersecurity hygiene, because it's going to solve an entire continent as a whole.
Okay. Thank you so much, Niles. That's absolutely the much our time can actually allow us to take on for today. We hope to have this conversation again with you some other time. Thank you for your time on the show. Well, it's our collective responsibility. It's our collective responsibility to see how much we are putting on the internet space, as we've heard the experts say. But that's the much we'll talk about today on Spotlight Africa. Thank you for being a part of this. I am Uyai MM. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
The hustle is real, but with hard work, you can become successful. And be your own king. Your wins are worth celebrating with Chelsea London Dry Gin. Chelsea London Dry Gin now comes in a non-refillable bottle with guala cap. Chelsea London Dry Gin. Right spirit, right feeling.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.